Hello, you guys. Welcome back to Kinda Hot, Kinda Healthy. If this is your first time listening because of our interview today, welcome. We are super excited to have you. I am Ali, the person you are hearing talking right now. I am a women's nutrition and fitness coach, and I really help the women that are stuck in the overwhelm, right? Like when you go on social media, there is so much confusing about fat loss and fitness. So like I'm the person you come to make that really simple. We simplify it. And that's kind of really all you need to know about me in this moment. If you want to learn more, stay for the podcast.
And I am Maddie Martinez. I'm a women's health and fitness coach, and I teach women how to lift, how to get stronger. And especially if you're already in the gym, like destroying your body, and you're like, why am I not getting lean? I fix everything for you. So that is what I do. And if you are not subscribed to our YouTube, make sure to subscribe and watch us because I think that's like 50% of the humor is delivered visually. But we created this podcast because we wanted to create a community for women to learn about their health, but honestly feel like they're just chit chatting with their girlfriends and having fun doing it. This episode specifically, it's always our second episode of the month, is a guest interview. And today we have Leslie. She is a fertility, I would say fertility specialist. She's gonna
Mhm.
introduce herself and give us the correct terminology of her like expertise. But we're talking all about women's fertility today. And she actually has a product too, which we're really interested and excited to talk about. But yeah, we hope you really enjoy this interview and stick around for more because we just love to chit chat it up.
Yeah. And I think this episode is, whenever we have guests on, right? Like some of them are health and fitness related. Some of them, if you go back to other episodes, are just people that we have found incredibly interesting. But there's always a
Mhm.
pathway back to community,
Mhm.
health, wellness. And I'm excited specifically for today's episode because there's this, I don't know if it's just being a woman, right? But there's this
Mhm.
innate fear of like not being able to get pregnant easily.
Mhm.
One of my friends, she had her son when she was 24. Like she sneezed and she got pregnant. And I'm always like, "Oh my goodness, like how heartbreaking is that? Like if you want children and
Mhm.
your whole life you kind of like are trying to not get pregnant, like let's keep it real. Like for a portion of your life you're trying to not get pregnant and then all of a sudden when you decide you're like, "Hell yeah, like this is our journey. This is what, me and my partner want to do." Then when there's obstacles or you don't even know how to properly go about it, right? Like I'm excited to talk to Leslie being like, "Hey, if I wanted to get pregnant in a year, what can I be doing now?" Right? Like what
Mhm.
can women do to be proactive because oftentimes it's not discussed like in experiences with like people in my circle, it's like you try for 6 months and then if nothing happens, then you go and talk to your doctor about it. And it's like, okay, we need to take a look at maybe what's not working. When if we had the more knowledge to be proactive and maybe do all that we can before even starting to try, then I don't know. I feel like it would be a big stress reliever. So I am like, I got
Yeah.
my questions. I'm like feeling excited.
It's funny because I just had a flashback and this memory like totally evaded my brain until like right now, just thinking about like getting your tubes tied as a
Oh, yeah.
pregnancy prevention. And I had this distinct memory of maybe I was in, yeah, I probably was in like maybe eighth grade. It had to be at least eighth grade, but junior high, high school, wherever it was. And I remember overhearing my parents talk about like a family friend of ours. The wife had her tubes tied, and the husband had a vasectomy, and they got pregnant.
Oh.
And I know, and
Oh my
I
God.
remember thinking like, oh my god, like
Not the
I
double whammy.
I know, and I can't remember. I don't know why it's popped in my head, but I just remember that. And like,
Sure.
we're gonna have to ask Leslie about that. Like, how does that happen? If she knows, because she's not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a specialist in that sense. She's not performing surgery. She's not a doctor in that sense. But that would be really interesting to talk about and have questions. And we're gonna definitely cover like Ali, about getting pregnant in a year. And I had some really good questions about IVF. So if this episode has helped you in any way, or you have more follow-up questions, like let us know. Send us a
Yeah.
DM. You can send us an email. And I always say the email at the end, it's kind of hotpot@gmail.com. But let us know if this was helpful for you, and make sure to send it to a girlfriend who would benefit from hearing this, because we're going to be talking about like how to help your body get pregnant and all the things that Leslie is a specialist in.
And on the other hand, how to avoid getting pregnant if
Yeah.
you don't want to be on a hormonal birth control, if you want
Mhm.
to just be able to understand when your body's ovulating, what to look out for, because even if you don't want to have children, you still should be informed
Mhm.
and have knowledge of what is like happening during your cycle every single month, because again, it's like this over over I guess, prescribing of just birth control for
Yeah.
a lot of different issues. And so I
Yeah.
think anyone who's listening to this conversation will walk away with something. And again, if your question wasn't answered or you wanted to dive deeper, let us know.
Mhm.
Our Instagrams will be in the bio. And we haven't done the interview yet with Leslie, but I'm sure we're going to have her back because knowing us, we love to just dive in deep and really get a firm understanding. And there's always more to learn.
Yeah, and I was even thinking back, Leslie and I did a live on Instagram about acne, and
Mm,
why acne happens, what can you do to prevent it, um, using birth control as a medication to fix your acne. We went like really in depth about that. So
mm.
she knows like a ton of things. Like she has a very long history with battling acne and getting through most of it. And I can't remember. I don't think she was an Accutane, but we do talk about Accutane.
Ooh,
But she really like this could be the I don't know how in depth we're gonna get into everything because there's so much to cover. So we'll probably have to have her on twice. Or this
yeah.
might be like a 3 hour episode and
Yeah,
like
literally. And especially if you are new to the podcast, we don't want to overwhelm you because we are definitely love to talk. We could go for I could go for 3 hours. Maddie would cut me off. But I do think the topic of acne, birth control, Accutane, all sorts of medication is so valuable because there's so many
Mhm.
just people that I see on TikTok, right? They're so vulnerable sharing their acne, their experiences. And a lot of what I see is, and again, this is not a field that I'm an expert in, but just knowing what I do know is like, oh, these are very likely hormonal issues and
Yeah.
they're not going to go away. And so if we
Mhm.
could platform somebody like Leslie and have her
Mhm.
share her expertise on these sorts of things, like you might be sitting there at home being like, "Oh damn, I need to learn something about my hormones and my acne because girl, this has been
Yeah.
a struggle." Like I know a lot of people that personally I will be sending specific podcast clips
Literally.
to.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting because, like you said, like talking about, hormones, talking about, the symptoms, intense or lack of symptoms with your
Yeah.
period, acne, it is all together. It is like I don't even know what the right word is, but it all connects, right? It's not
Yeah.
like fixing your acne is not a superficial thing you can do by just putting on ointment. It is
Right.
deeper than that. And it's just kind of like our medical system is so much of like here's a steroid,
Yeah.
here's birth control to fix your period, here's that. And
Yeah.
women are just so like, I mean, wasn't it just like this year or not too long ago they just started using real blood when they are testing period products?
Yeah, you talked about that. Recently, weirdly enough, I was talking with a plumber about this. Like somebody that I'm like friends with is a plumber. And I'm like, he was talking about like not flushing tampons or
Mhm.
whatever. And, the
Yes.
lore of that, go back and listen. You'll find it. That's all I'm going to say. But we got into this conversation because he has sisters and he's just like, some guys are just like totally like obtuse and they're like, ugh. But, we're having a conversation. And I'm like,
Mhm.
did you know that like in recent years, they started like using actual like blood to like test period products and sanitary products? And he's like,
Uh-huh.
I literally had no idea. And I'm like, yeah, they don't even work that well because like they were not
Yeah.
like tested on absorbing blood, which is crazy.
I'm not crazy because it was a man that probably was like,
No,
"We don't
not
need
not
blood."
crazy, but I am crazed about it.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Even, they just started, approving, I don't know what the right terminology is, local anesthesia for inserting IUDs, which is a big
Yes.
deal. And if you've ever
Yep.
had one inserted, I had a copper IUD inserted, and I would have to say the pain. Did I talk about the story about when they took it out here?
You I know we talked about it in depth. I'm not sure if you did, but
Mm.
either way, my vagina has a visceral reaction.
Yeah, they well, anyway, it hurt so freaking bad putting it in. The guy's like, "You're
Oh,
gonna feel." This is the last time I ever went to a male gynecologist, literally.
I
Never
would
will I ever
never.
again.
That's
I know,
crazy.
it was like my person wasn't there, he was
Sure, sure,
available.
sure. Hey, you
Yeah, it
had to do what
wasn't
you had to do.
it wasn't a first pick. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're like, "You feel a small bit of pressure," and no, it was like the
Really?
life being taken out of me, I know. And then
What a
getting it out.
douche.
Right, getting it out, I got it out, like, how long ago? Last June, so it's been over a year,
Oh my
not this
God.
past.
Wow.
Mhm, and it was when I was, like, in the thick of my autoimmune disease journey, and, my gynecologist was like, "Copper IUD does not affect your hormones at all. There's no way it's affecting your hormones." And my coach was like, "It does. It's a foreign object," and lo and behold, I ended up having, like copper toxicity for whatever better word lack of better words,
Hmm.
and because of other things happening and I couldn't get the excess copper out, so of course it was causing something in my body. Anyway, she goes to get it out. Only thing she pulls out is the string.
No, no,
Yes, and she goes, "Uh-oh," and, like, that's not what you wanna hear when someone
no,
is, like, 10 feet up your body, like,
ma'am.
"Uh-oh." I
Not
know.
uh-oh. You
I'm
keep that
laying on.
mouth closed and you figure it out.
Literally, I wouldn't say that if I was I'd be like, "Oh, we're good." Yeah, anyway, and I had no anything, no lidocaine, no nothing. She was like, yeah, so we have 1 or 2 options. 1, I keep pulling and we get it out, or 2, you go under and we go into the OR." Like, I'm not trying to go under anesthesia, like, on a Tuesday at, like, 10. Like, what?
Honestly, um, so I have a pretty good pain tolerance,
Uh-huh.
but there is something so vulnerable and just it's too much to be having
Mhm.
somebody try and like rake this out of me.
Yeah,
Like
that's what it felt like.
that's horrifying. I probably
Yeah.
would have said, yeah, just give me the drugs. Like I literally would have had to pay anytime I have to go to the gynecologist, pop a
Yeah.
benzo because it's why didn't people that do not have to go to the gynecologist do not understand it's
I
just
know.
so invasive. And then
I know.
to just be like, oops.
So she is like, "I'm gonna just tell me if it's too much. I'm gonna keep trying." I was like, "Okay,
Oh
we're
no.
gonna we're gonna grit and bear our way through this." I wanted to get it out. I needed to get it out because like it was stopping my healing journey. I was like, "Okay, I just
Yeah.
have to do it. Like there's no other choice. Like I need to get this out." So she would grab onto it and then it would let go. Grab onto it and let go. It literally felt like someone just punching up my freaking uterus. It hurt so I was throw up worthy. She finally pulls it out. And like an IUD, it's like a T. That's the
Is
shape.
a T. Is a T.
Imagine a T in your body doing its thing. It was all the way like crooked in like the walls of I don't know where they put it, my fallopian tubes. I don't know, wherever it was supposed to be. Where is it supposed to be?
I think in your cervix. Like it goes
Oh,
all the way up in your
I don't know how
fallopian
they
tube.
put that in there. But anyway,
They
it was
go they go high and tight.
I don't they put it was stuck in the wall of my
Oh
cervix. She
no.
pulls it out and shows me it's completely crooked, demented.
Don't show
Like
me. Don't show me.
don't
That's disgusting.
I don't have a picture.
No, to your
Oh,
gynecologist.
oh,
I was
oh,
like,
oh, oh.
that's trauma enough. I felt
And
it. I don't need to
and
see this.
and she goes, "Well, that was definitely causing issues." I'm like, "You don't say." It hurts so bad, but I have a like I'm committed to doing something, like I will see it through. And
Mhm.
I was like, this thing is coming out no matter what. I'm not going under
Right.
anesthesia. We're not doing that game today. Like, no. She got it out. I was fine, but that was the most horrendous pain. Like it was like 10x of putting it in. Like, can you imagine like pulling
No.
it and then falling off, pulling it, and it
No.
was probably 15
That's
minutes of
literally
that.
disgusting. That's horrible. It's like,
Yeah.
ugh, ugh. No, I
Mhm.
couldn't. I couldn't. So to make a good story out of that is we're
Mhm.
gonna ask Leslie specific questions on like if you are trying to avoid pregnancy and not being on any type of birth control, right? Like you're trying to just like do your thing, live your life, peace and love. You're like, I just can't. I've tried different types of birth control. I've tried IUDs. I just want to try and do something different, right? Like have this, I think maybe like a deeper awareness with your body. And like, I'm somebody that got off birth control and I had literally zero reactions. Like, I would say I had a
Mm.
very good experience basically because like I
Mhm.
didn't have a doctor anymore. Like, I was in college and I was like, all right, shit, like, whatever. I'm just going to go off of it because it made me a raging asshole. So we're just going to
Mhm.
do whatever.
Mhm.
And I was like, my fiance now, I was with him at the time. So I was like, I'm not on birth control. Like, so we are have to figure that out. But it's sad for a lot of people also because I think we live in like in the wellness space, it's like very anti-birth control.
Mhm.
And so I think what we're here to do is just like provide information and take what you need, right? Because like I'm not
Mhm.
also going to be somebody that's like, you need to get off birth control or you need to do this or that because everybody has their own journey and like what's going to
Mhm.
work for them and like
Mhm.
peace and love. You do you. I had a coach
Mhm.
that tried to tell me to go on like a progesterone birth control because she was like, that will help your hormones. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Uh,
I don't know about
uh,
that.
I am like of the mindset of like to always do what's best for you, right? I have
Hmm.
clients who are on birth control because the idea of getting off birth control is a bit scary for them based on the symptoms they
Totally.
were experiencing beforehand, and that was helpful for
Totally.
them. It's always what makes the most sense for you, but I think being well equipped with the knowledge of what it is doing to your body is very, very, very important. Doctors love to say there are no side effects, nothing's going to happen, there's no hormones in here, like, don't worry, right? That is hiding the truth of what these things actually do to our body and what it's stopping. And a period bleed or a pill bleed is not a regular bleed. You are not actually ovulating, and that is super, super important for our bodies, especially having as many as we can ovulatory bleeds and having ovulations before we hit perimenopause and menopause. Like, that's important. And I think having as much information as possible and making a decision based on your health is always what we want. Why would I think any legitimate and trustworthy coach would want for their client?
Hmm.
Like, whenever I was deciding, like, what net new not new what next thing do we need to do to like take my autoimmune more serious, she's like, well, we need to eventually get off your copper IUD. And it's like, okay, like I could definitely do that. And I track my period, probably not as good as I should be. I don't have an aura ring yet, but I do take like the basal body temperature and I follow it that way. But I think always, like I always said, take what you need. We're not against, I mean, I'm against using birth control as a fixing mechanism because it's not. But
Yeah.
I'm not against making the best decision for you when you know all the information.
Yeah. I think it would just be kind of sitting, how do I say? I think it would be silly to sit here and say that everybody should come off of it or everybody should make the same decision because there are, like you said, some people might be scared to come off of it or some people might, there's just a lot of
Mhm.
situations. And so, like you said, just like being able to have all of the information and then making an informed decision is the best
Mhm.
thing that you can do, because again, you might go to your doctor and you love your doctor and you trust your doctor, but maybe they're leaving some things out.
Of course.
And so this is us to like help bridge that gap, because it was always like, oh, if your periods are irregular, you get on birth control, or if you're
Mhm.
having bad cramps, you get on birth control. And
Mhm.
when you're younger, you might not have the wherewithal or even the just the confidence to speak up on
Mhm.
that. So this is us kind of giving you that information to maybe feel more confident, to feel more
Mhm.
informed, to ask those questions. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I'm like super excited to get into this interview. And yeah, do you
Yeah.
have anything you want to say before we get into this interview?
We are not doctors. This is not medical advice for you to take. We are not doctors. Do not take this as medical advice. Always consult your doctor first. Even though I trash on the doctors I've had, I still want you to do that. So please do not take this as medical advice because it is not.
And with that, we'll get into the interview.
Hi guys. Hi Leslie. We're so excited to have you here. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, guys. My name is Leslie Monnette. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and my emphasis is in female health, hormones, and fertility. So I help a lot of women both get off of birth control, regulate their periods after birth control, or kind of like solve some hormonal based issues post birth control, but then also getting pregnant and struggling with infertility or just preconception health. It's not something that's talked about a lot, but it's something that we need to start talking about more in our day and age, and just how many of us are having like a negative experience on birth control and getting off birth control. Preconception health is more important now than it was 10, 20 years ago. So I talk a lot about that. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about fertility today.
I'm
Yeah.
glad I didn't try to introduce your like title because I was like,
Yeah.
oh, fertility specialist. That's how I said it.
That's okay. You can call me that too.
How did
I'm
you? Oh,
super
go ahead, Abby.
excited. That's okay. I was just going to say, I'm super excited for this because I know that there are so many women that are going to be in our audience that have wanted to come off birth control or that had a really bad experience, got back on it. There's so many people probably wanting to, in their season of life, get pregnant or just even learning more about their body, their cycle, because I feel right now a lot in the wellness community, we're becoming more people are putting more of an emphasis on learning and understanding like what's happening during their cycle. So I'm really excited for this, and we have a lot of really good questions for you.
Good. Yay. I love it.
How did you get into this realm of like health and fitness?
Well, I think that that's kind of like everyone has the same story. I had my own issues. And so well, if I go way back, I started with just health and fitness from like in high school. I was super
Mhm.
athletic. I was like, I don't want to do business. Here I am running my own business, but I didn't want to do like business and marketing. So I went to school for nutrition and exercise,
Mhm.
like kinesiology.
Mm.
And I was more so on the camp of like macros, dieting. Like I wasn't a bodybuilder, but bodybuilder lifestyle. And then I started learning more about, I actually listened to a podcast that talked about birth control like in college, and
Mhm.
how this woman it took her like 3 years to get her period back after she stopped. And that scared the living daylights out of me. So
Mhm.
Mm,
I was like, I'm getting off tomorrow. And I kind of just got off birth control and then dove into functional health after that, because I was like, I always kind of had like a mistrust in the medical system, just from growing up and things with my own family and whatnot. And yeah, throughout my own issues and my own journey getting off birth control, acne, bloating, I've had so many GI issues throughout my life that I really, after I graduated college, I then for like 4 years was in cohorts and continuing ed and programs and programs and programs to get extra education outside of college in more of the functional realm of fertility, hormones, nutrition.
Mhm. That makes sense. Like you said, like we all have these journeys that like lead us to, what we like really love to help teach on. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that like spoke out to me really quickly when you said earlier is that preconception health is more important now than it was before. Why would you say that?
Well, I think a lot of people will probably understand this when I say it, but if we look at our food, it's different. If we look at like everyone's working from home at a desk, inside, artificial light, not getting outside, not touching grass, not hugging trees, not getting sunlight. And so we're just in this environment, and also our food is so different, and we're surrounded by so many toxic chemicals that we have to put a lot more emphasis on our health, our nutrient status, and our lifestyle in order to have healthy eggs and healthy sperm to get pregnant before you can get pregnant. And so like 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have as many chemicals, we didn't have as much artificial food, we were working more outside on the land, we weren't working inside all the time. So just our as the world has shifted, like we know that it takes more work to just eat healthy. And it takes,
Mhm.
I would argue, takes more work to stay lean now than it did before because of the amount of social peer pressure with alcohol is normalized, drugs are normalized, eating processed food and junk is normalized. It just takes more work to go against the, what is the word? Not innovations, but just like the way our world has gone, right? We have to take, it takes more work to be more of a natural human of where we came from. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
about how many products I've switched to that are non-toxic, and it takes more work to find them. They're usually more expensive because they have more time put into creating them. And yeah, I can definitely see just from, going through my autoimmune journey, it takes a lot of work to get back to more natural way of living.
Yeah. Like we didn't have non-toxic before. It was just
Hmm.
it was just lotion. And now it's
Yeah.
Right.
okay, we need to get the non-toxic lotion because our lotion has become toxic.
Mhm.
So
Hmm.
that's kind of a way I explain it to my clients is I know it seems like the world is out to get you, and it's not, but that's just how things have gone. And so it's going to take more work to kind of live a life that we lived 10, 20 years ago. I would argue more like 20 years ago than we live today.
Yeah. And I'm curious if like the women that you work with, if some of them are like 33 plus, because again, I think it's also people are having children just a little bit later for financial reasons or just whatever it may be. And I'm curious if you do work with women that, it's kind of crazy, like a geriatric pregnancy is like 35 plus or 34, which is like, don't associate me with geriatric at 34, please. um but do you work with, like, what's the age range? Because of course, like you said, there's a lot more that people have to be cognizant about to have healthy eggs, have healthy sperm, to be able to get pregnant. So what is that age range that you find yourself working with?
I think well, it really ranges. I work
Yeah.
with a lot of I have several college students on my roster. So I work
Wow.
with women in college all the way up to probably around 40. And the journey differs. And I think
Mhm.
of it as like my personal journey is the client journey that I have. It starts with like maybe 26 and younger. They're just trying to get off birth control and regulate their periods. And then I would say around 26 up to I have a woman that's 38 that's trying to get pregnant right now. So up through 40, we're working on fertility and actually getting to a place where you can get pregnant. And
Mm.
they do need a better word than geriatric for
Yeah.
that's just like, can we pick a different word? Like, why does it have to be that? But if we want to get in the topic of egg health, this is something that like I am very passionate about, and not a lot of people talk or think about their eggs. Everyone wants to talk about hormones. No one wants to talk
Yeah.
about eggs. And a piece of just kind of like not advice, but maybe it's calming to women that maybe are 34, 35, 36, and they're wanting to get pregnant, or they feel like, oh my God, I need to do it yesterday. Like My time is running out. So you're born with the amount of eggs that you're going to have, right? We're not creating new eggs. However, you don't just have like a sack of 100,000 eggs just sitting there. They're just DNA, suspended DNA, right? And then your eggs start developing about 3 to 4 months before you ovulate. So that DNA goes through a process of all these different, like, I'm going to call it photosynthesis. It's going through photosynthesis, if we think of it like that, from DNA to ovulation today, like if you ovulated today. So you have the power to change the health of your eggs from that DNA to what you ovulate with today. Now, it's going to take 3 to 4 months to get to work on that one egg that you ovulate with today. And every month, like that started on a different timeline. But a lot of women think, oh, at 35, my eggs are bad. No, your eggs are still just floating DNA. You have the power within your lifestyle to nurture that DNA to a very healthy egg that you're going to ovulate with.
Yeah.
And a lot of women don't know that and they don't think about it like that. And in the medical world, they're just told, oh, fertility declines when you hit this age. Well, why does it decline? Why do our eggs get unhealthy at that age, or why do we have less? Well, think about how busy you are. Think about how much more you're doing and how much less you're maybe doing for yourself. Maybe this is also, if you don't have the greatest diet, this has now been a longer period of time on an unhealthy diet. It's been a longer period of time in a sedentary lifestyle. Maybe you have gut issues. Maybe you got off of birth control and you never really properly helped your body bounce back from that birth control. And so you have all these lingering issues that have just compounded over the years. But if you really work on those things and kind of work on your overall health, then you can have healthy eggs over the age of 35. It's in your power.
I love that. Especially, I don't know why this scene is like coming into my head, but I was watching, it was on Summer House, and Lindsay is like close to 40. She wanted to get pregnant. She went and had her eggs looked at, I guess. And the doctor was like, oh, this is what we're looking to see. And you actually have rock star healthy eggs. But then on, different reality shows or different scripted shows, it's always like, you have very few eggs left and they're not so great. And it always feels like a very powerless conversation to watch, whether it's, reality or scripted. And so I love how you're coming at it with this empowering approach.
Mm-hmm. And when they're looking at that, like they can't see the eggs that haven't been like gone through that photosynthesis, quote unquote, yet, right? They're only looking at what is actually maturing in the follicles in your ovaries at that time. So you might be going through a period of a lot of stress. You might be I mean, if you're on a reality TV
Mm.
show, you're
Yeah.
probably stressed out to the max. You're like, if you're drinking and maybe doing drugs, or you have a really unhealthy lifestyle, and then you have that appointment, I'm not surprised if they tell
Mhm.
you that. But then you can change that and go back in 6 months and you have more eggs showing up because you changed your lifestyle over the course of 6 months.
So
Wow.
when they are checking to see how many eggs you have, that is only at that time. That's not the rest.
Correct.
Wow, I always thought it was the
Yeah.
rest.
Because
No.
they're always like, oh, you have like 10 good eggs. And I'm like, oh, God, that is terrifying. Like, way to put stress on a
Yeah.
woman's body when you're telling her you have 10 good eggs left. That's it. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
stress relief.
Yeah, because it's like I said, you're born with, I don't even remember the number. It's so many, like hundreds of thousands of eggs, right? And then they're just DNA. And then it's kind of like, if you think about like your hair growing, right? You
Mm.
don't look in your skull and see the hair dangling back in, like where it's coming out of, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You don't see it until it's matured and growing out of your head. It's
Mm.
just floating DNA, and then it creates the hair coming out of your head, but it always keeps growing. So our eggs are just this floating DNA, and then they form as your cycle goes on, and your ovaries are ready for new eggs. And then your ovaries have follicles, and those follicles are like a home for your most mature eggs. And then over the course of several months, 3 to 4 months, that's where your eggs are maturing in a line. And then the most mature ovulates. And then the next month, the next mature one ovulates. Some of them don't make it. Some of them might not have the best DNA to be able to ovulate with. But yeah, so when they're looking at your ovaries, like they're seeing like what is being matured right now.
Hmm. Did never knew that. No. Now I feel like I it feels like a less stressful
Mm-hmm.
thought because me and my fiance talk about this all the time. Like, we want to like start having kids like right away. And so I came into this conversation like knowing like for the people listening to this that are looking to, trying to conceive within a year, 2 years, is there like what stuff can you be doing now to make that easier? And I know there's
Mm-hmm.
not really a guarantee that it
Yeah.
will be easy breezy, right? But what can we do to make that process, to support the process, I guess is how I would say it.
First, I always tell women to get off birth control at least a year before.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than what your doctor will tell you. But we do have research that backs up that it takes women 8 to 12 months to conceive after they stop birth control. And that is because it takes about 8 to 12 months for your body to fully regulate back to pre-birth control hormones and status. So I always suggest a year, if not more. And that's the first step because it breaks my heart when women come to me and they're like, I got off birth control and I've been trying for 6 months and it's not working. And my doctor said I have to try for another 6 months before they can even suggest anything for me. And I'm like, there's so much research. Why is your doctor like, why do they not talk about this? And
Mm.
I just wish that doctors would encourage women to get off sooner instead of just telling them to get off within like a couple of months, because you may save some heartbreak if you do get off earlier, and give your body that time to regulate. So that would be my first thing. Have you ever heard the term like oxidative stress?
No.
Yeah.
Oxidative stress is stress at a cellular level, so microscopic stress within your cells. And the biggest issue with eggs having chromosomal errors, like one of the leading causes of infertility is eggs that are not chromosomally fit to survive and sperm that is not chromosomally fit to survive. And when I say that, my husband always tells me I talk about fertility like it's a science experiment, which I do because I'm in the research so much. But if it's nothing wrong with you, it's just if the egg and the sperm don't have the right DNA, they're not going to grow together in the way
Mm.
that they should. And that's not your fault, it's not his fault. There may be lifestyle factors that we can work on to improve on that, but it's just like the math equation just doesn't add up. Like 2 plus 2 is not it's equaling 5 today, and we want it to equal 4. And so oxidative stress is one of the biggest things that we can work on to improve egg quality and to improve sperm quality. And then that in turn improves your hormone quality. And it's the same list of things that we talk about with regular stress. So like dealing with emotions and burnout, trauma, poor sleep, under eating, under recovery, a sedentary lifestyle, poor diet, gut issues, mold toxicity, all of those things it's the same. Like working it on and addressing all of those things at a root cause is going to enhance your fertility, and it's going to enhance your egg and sperm quality.
Mm.
And I can dig into those like individually if you want. I didn't know if you had
Yeah.
questions or you
Let's do
want me to
like a mini, like a little scratching the surface because I feel like you could probably get like very deep
Very.
into it. Yeah. But I really enjoy how you're framing this in a very empowering way because again, like you said, I have been off birth control for like maybe 7 years. And I actually had a fine experience coming off of it. It wasn't really talked about as much whenever I did come off of it. But there are so many women that, like you said, they get off of it, they're trying to get pregnant, their doctor isn't, I don't know, like talking to them in a way that's actually helpful, which is frustrating. And I mean, at this point, I'm sure a lot of women listening to this are just kind of like, yeah, that's like what you expect, but that's really upsetting. Like,
Yeah.
why do we settle for that? So I like how you're really is framing this conversation to be very empowering, because trying to conceive, fertility issues, concerns can feel really, really frustrating, and like you don't have the control. So I just wanted to let you know that the way you talk about it and like express it
Mhm.
really is, I feel like it's very calming, and it provides a lot of like confidence and reassurance and power in the women themselves.
Oh, good. Well, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I do, that is kind of like my goal is to like help women to realize like you don't have to be the statistic. You can, I don't remember who I had a conversation with the other day about like, um, that X, like if you look at research and math and science, whatever it is, like medical stuff, we have so much research that we know X, Y, and Z is most likely to happen or would never happen or is very rare. But I like to always leave 10% to magic. Like
Mhm.
there's always like a little bit of me that's like, but you never know because we don't know everything. And that's always reassuring to me. I try to instill that in my clients too, of like, yeah, there is parameters for stuff and we have a lot of knowledge here. And if we do these things, we're going to get us that 90%. But then there's always 10% where we can't explain it, but it turned out really well. And I like to move forward with that method with my clients as well.
What would you say is, one of the things you said is getting off birth control, at least before a year before you plan to get pregnant. Talking about birth control, what would you say you've noticed? Maybe what type of birth control, I don't want to say has like the worst effects on women, but like maybe it's just like can cause like the most amount of issues.
Well, I would say that the one women, I don't like using the word bounce back, but like maybe recover from the easiest is usually the IUD. Um,
Mhm.
the one that I see, well, the few that I see, it's more difficult is like the implant, the shot,
Mm.
and the pill.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Those three tend to cause more side effects and be more difficult kind of bouncing back from those or recovering from those. Whereas the IUD tends to have the least amount of symptoms. That doesn't mean that if you have the IUD, you are exempt from symptoms. Some people have a really bad experience with the IUD, but on average, I usually see with the IUD less symptoms on and easier transition off.
Mm. And would that be like all IUDs in general, or like copper IUD?
Well, yeah, both. I was more so referring to like the Mirena, like the
Mirena. Okay.
Mhm.
Yep.
hormonal one. Um,
Yep.
the copper IUD is something that I used to recommend to women if they wanted um hormonal or not a non-hormonal birth control option that wasn't tracking your cycle.
Yep.
That was like years ago, and now I like strongly advise against it. I know so many women that have had copper toxicity or just so
Me.
so
Yeah.
many issues with copper and their mineral balance that causes them in
Mhm.
so much pain. Um,
Mhm.
Oh.
so I don't recommend that one either. Of course, I'm not a doctor though, so talk to your doctor about that.
Oh, we did a big disclaimer in the beginning. I'm like,
Disclaimer.
yeah, we were
Just
like,
put
we are
like
not
the
doctors.
lower chyron, like
Yeah,
not a doctor. Do not take this as medical advice.
yeah.
Um, okay, so that's so interesting that obviously it's not across the board, but there certain forms have more side effects, or the recovery period is a bit longer. Um, I know for myself, when I was on the pill, like that was the only type of birth control I was on. It was a disaster, but there wasn't a lot of knowledge to like, oh, I have other options. And then when I got off of it, it was just kind of like, oh, I don't have a doctor right now. She left the practice. And so we're just gonna get off of this and see what happens. And like, weirdly enough, it was like, I not weirdly, but I just was so much more stable. Like I was less anxious, less crazy. I was literally crazy. Like the rage was crazy. And so Maddie, when you got off the copper IUD, what did you have any like what was that experience like? Because for me, like I felt really lucky because I know there are so many women that like share their stories that it was not an easy process.
Yeah, so I definitely lucked out. Most of my symptoms occurred during having the IUD, and when I
Yeah.
say they were painful periods, like I was on the bathroom floor, just like it was very, very painful, super freaking heavy to the point where I'm like, I don't want to leave my house. Like, how does that work when you're, living, working, and I was, coaching at a gym at that time, so that was like not fun at all. And for me, the copper toxicity was only getting worse because I had really poor bile
Mhm.
production. So getting off the copper IUD and Leslie, I'm pretty sure I told you that story of getting the copper IUD out.
Ugh.
We told it earlier just before this. But afterwards, like bile production got a lot better. We haven't checked my minerals since, but they were really, really off from having that and not having a way to get that copper out pretty much. So my symptoms now, periods are, I would say, like a tenth of what the pain they used to be. They're not heavy as they used to be. It improved a lot, but there wasn't, because I was on the pill for how many years? What, a couple years. Didn't have any big things happen, like any kind of things that you experienced. But then the copper is what was like the big,
Mm.
like, whoa, this is weird. This is a lot different. So it's kind of interesting
Oof.
how, like, hormonal birth control did nothing, quote unquote, to me mentally or physically, really, but the copper one was the worst for me.
Yeah.
Mm. Wow. That's crazy.
hmm As far as non hormonal things and non implantation things, what do you recommend for women to track their cycle? Let's
Mm.
say we can start with if they want to get pregnant, and then if they are like, I don't want to get pregnant, like me, like one for Allie, one for me.
So if you're trying to get pregnant, well, I would start the same with both
hmm
scenarios.
hmm
So especially, I'm going to talk about it as if like you're a beginner, you don't know about your cycle, you
hmm
don't really
Yeah.
know what to do. So when you're not on birth control, you have three phases of your cycle, right? And this is where there's a lot of controversy. Some people will say four. But you have your follicular phase, which day one of your follicular phase is also day one of your period. So your period falls within the follicular phase. Um, and so that is phase one up until you ovulate. And then ovulation is technically only 24 hours. However, sperm can live in the reproductive tract for up to 5 to 6 days.
Wow.
So there is what I call like your window of opportunity is also within the follicular phase. So your follicular phase, there's a lot going on. You get your period in it and your window of opportunity is in it. And it's when you usually feel the best.
Mm.
Typically the longest for people, technically it's anywhere from like 12 to 21 days. So for some people it might be shorter than their luteal phase, but typically I see it being a little bit longer. And your window of opportunity is the day that you ovulate and then backtrack 5 days. So the last 5 days of your follicular phase and ovulation. That's where you need to be careful if you do not want to get pregnant, because that sperm, if you have unprotected sex on Monday and you ovulate on Friday, you could get pregnant. Now, this
hmm
window of opportunity is where you want to go at it if you're trying to get pregnant. And then ovulation happens, you release your egg, travels up to your fallopian tubes, and then it just kind of hangs out there waiting for sperm. And if sperm does not meet it, then it disintegrates and it kind of will shed out with your period in when your luteal phase is over. I like to talk about ovulation as kind of a door. Ovulation
Mm.
is the door opening from follicular phase to the luteal phase because it's such a short phase.
Mm.
It's only 24 hours that the egg is actually there. So it's kind of like you're stepping through that door from follicular to then you ovulate, you open the door, and then you're in the luteal phase. And then you're in your luteal phase up until you start your period. So
Mhm.
the luteal phase maximum can last 16 days. If you don't get pregnant, it can be shorter though. And so if it's shorter than 11 days, that's more so signs of low progesterone. You want to address that. You don't want your your luteal phase to be shorter than 11 days on average. So how would you track all of this? Well, first, understanding that was a very brief understanding. So you can follow me for more information on that. I have a lot on my social medias, but you would track a couple different things. So let's talk about cervical mucus first. So this is like discharge that you either see when you wipe or in your underwear. If you don't have discharge at all, it doesn't always mean something is wrong with you. It can be very normal that you just have minimal discharge. But keep in mind that that could also be a symptom of low estrogen. So if you have other things like irregular periods, your period's missing, something to tune into of when there's a cluster of those symptoms, oh, maybe let's pay attention to that. But if your cycles are normal, you ovulate normally, don't worry if you don't have a lot of discharge. But basically, your period or your hormones are at their very lowest point day one of your cycle when you're on your period. And your hormones, specifically estrogen and testosterone, increase as you get closer to ovulation. And ovulation is like the pinnacle, it is the peak. It is when estrogen and testosterone are the highest out of your entire monthly cycle. Progesterone is not really present in this follicular phase. So, estrogen's job as it climbs from day one to ovulation is to thin your cervical mucus for sperm to go up your reproductive tract and meet the egg. So that's why you notice discharge, because estrogen is rising and you have more discharge. So if you see it's really thick and tacky, that means you're probably you're not necessarily in that fertile window yet, that window of opportunity. As it gets more stringy, stretchy, or even just straight up water and it feels like you just peed your pants, that's where you are in that fertile zone, and you need to either express caution and use extra protection or avoidance, or you need to go to the bedroom right now if you're trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Depending on your goals. And that is one way to tell when you're getting close to ovulation. Something else that you can do is ovulation test strips, or LH test strips. This stands for luteinizing hormone. Now, these are probably the most tricky method, but I do recommend women at least try them for a month or two just to kind of see and to learn about their cycle and to
Mm.
learn about themselves. If you've never used them, I would start on day 8, and you're going to do one every day until you see it positive and then go negative again, just for one cycle. And
And are
then
you doing that just to kind of like you're just tracking data? You're like, okay, on day whatever it is, I absolutely was ovulating. Okay.
yes, because the way it's kind of like a pregnancy test. Like there's a
Mm.
control line that shows up red, and then if you have LH present in high amounts, it will match that control line. If it's low, it'll either not show up at all or it'll be a very faint pink. And the reason I say to test for so long is because it's usually only a day that you're going to see it positive. And some women, they like may miss it, or they don't know like what negative looks like if they only
Mm.
start testing a day or two before they ovulate. So I usually say for 1 month, do it like every day, just so you can see what it looks like when it's low. And then you'll see, oh wow, oh, it's really pink. Oh wow, it's red. Oh wow, the next day it's white again. And you'll be able to really clearly see that peak. Now, LH, when it's positive, it means that you're about to ovulate within the next 36 hours. So cervical mucus and LH positive tests tell you when you're close to ovulating. Cervical mucus gives you like that 5 to 6 day window, like you can kind of see the transition in your discharge. LH is like, oh, it's happening. It's going to happen.
Mm.
Disclaimer, you can have a positive LH and not ovulate. So
Mm.
that is a possibility.
And why
Um,
is that?
that would just be like if maybe your egg wasn't healthy, your hormones are in
Mm.
a not great place. A lot of women with PCOS tend to have elevated LH. Um, And that goes a lot with just all of the other hormonal kind of symphony that they're dealing with. So sometimes LH and PCOS cases will be high all the time, or it's high and low and high and low and high and low. And then the third time it goes high is when you ovulate. Kind of like your
Okay.
body's trying to, but it's just not there yet.
Mm.
So that is something, it's not common, like unless you have PCOS to have a peak and not ovulate, but just know that's a disclaimer I like to give because a lot of women will not do basal body temperature, which I'm about to talk about. They'll only do LH test strips. And I'm like, but the thing is that that's not a confirmation. That is,
Mm,
you're about to if everything goes right.
okay.
Okay.
Is that why? Because I've heard, I don't know, I'm like blanking on where I've even heard this, but people wherever I heard this will be like the ovulation strips are like a waste of money. Would that be because it's not a definite, but it can be a way to collect data, but if you had PCOS, it would maybe be confusing or
Yes, and also your LH surge is only for 36 hours. So
right.
if you miss it, you might look like you got a negative test and you're like, I didn't ovulate this month, but you did. You just lost
Mm,
surge when you tested.
Mm.
right, right,
So I like to use them in the beginning of tracking fertility and tracking ovulation. So just that collection of data, understanding yourself, understanding. After that, if you have a good idea of your basal body temperature, you start routinely seeing, okay, I typically ovulate around this day or this day. You're paying attention to your cervical mucus, you're paying attention to your sex drive because that will increase around ovulation. You don't always need to do LH test strips, but it's something
right.
I like to teach so women know how to use them properly and they can get that data in the beginning. And then if they want to keep using them, they can. But if they don't and they're good and in tune with the other methods, you don't have to use
Yeah. I like that.
Hmm.
It's you're to me it feels like you're teaching all of the tools in the toolbox, and that's a lot of what we do as coaches is just giving the tools and knowing how to properly use them versus just like here's all the tools and try
it.
and see what works. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Cool.
a lot of my clients, I'm like, okay, send me a screenshot. I'm looking at charts like every day. Like, okay, here
Yeah.
we go. And this is where this peaked, and this is where that peaked, and this is where you ovulated. So we're going over like every month. It's like one of my favorite things. And then the next method is basal body temperature. This one's my favorite, and this is the one that I think everyone should do if you're trying to get pregnant or you're not trying, because it also gives us data outside of ovulation specifically. So your temperature rises in the luteal phase. So when you open that door after you ovulate, we walk through to the luteal phase. Progesterone starts being secreted because the follicle that released the egg turns into a whole new gland called the corpus luteum, luteal phase. And that corpus luteum is what secretes progesterone in your ovary during the luteal phase. So progesterone has a heating effect on the body. So it increases
Mm.
our temperature a little bit. It also increases our metabolic rate a little bit, hence why we get so hungry in the luteal phase. So that temp rises slightly. And that increase in temp tells you and confirms you ovulated when that temp rises and remains elevated, because it's going to remain elevated the entire luteal phase because you're producing progesterone the entire luteal phase. So what you would do is you would get a basal body thermometer, which you can get on Amazon for like $15. You do want a basal body, not just like a regular medical one, because it goes 2 points past the decimal versus one. And the
Mm-hmm.
temp change is very small. But in your chart on like your app, it will look bigger because the chart is in small decimals. And so your temp will be like maybe 97.2, 97.3 throughout your follicular phase. You ovulate and it jumps up to like 97.9 or even 98. And then it'll stay in the 98s throughout your entire luteal phase. And then that means you ovulated and you can pinpoint my LH peaked on Thursday. My temperature peaked on Saturday. I ovulated on Friday. And then you can see when you ovulated. And that tells you a lot of, it's important to know when you did ovulate. One, so if you are trying to get pregnant, like on average, after you do this cycle after cycle, I typically ovulate on day 18. So that means that my fertile window is going to be day like 13 through 18 of when we need to have sex. Or
Mm-hmm.
I typically ovulate on day 18. So this is when my fertile window is, and I need to be extra careful and cautious around this time. It also tells you that you did ovulate, because sometimes you can have an anovulatory cycle where you don't ovulate, especially after the first couple months after birth control. So it can tell you if you even are ovulating. And then also, by tracking your basal body temperature, you see when you ovulated and then when you get your next period, to know how long your luteal phase is. And going back to what we said earlier, you want your luteal phase to be between like 12 to 16 days. If it's routinely 11 days or less, that is a sign of low progesterone. So you can see a lot of data about yourself and about your hormones by simply taking your temperature every single day, every single morning. And you
So
do that before you get out of bed.
What
So
if you have to like pee at 4 a.m.?
this is the most common question I get about this. So just if you have to pee at 4 a.m. and you don't turn the lights on, you just like go do your business and get back in bed and fall asleep, you're fine. Just take it when you get up before you like, get up for the day is usually what I tell people. Some like fertility people, they will be like, you need to take it at 4 a.m. because that's when you've been at rest. I don't think you need to be that strict with it. I've never had an issue myself with, and I get up and pee like 2 to 3 times a night, and I've always seen a consistent trend. And same with my clients. I've never, with the advice I've given them of just take it before you actually get up for the day, I've never had any of them struggle with that.
Love that.
I,
What were
I
you gonna
was
say,
gonna
Maddie?
I was gonna ask, so if, like you said, if you're testing your LH, you said, and it gives you that 36-hour window, and what was it, your Thursday to Saturday example, and the temperature rose on Saturday, is it, you said the day before is when we ovulated?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So if your LH peaks on
Mhm.
Thursday, you have
Mhm.
sometime within the next 36 hours, you're going to ovulate. And then your temperature peaks after you've ovulated. So then you wake up on Saturday morning and, oh, it's elevated. That means that I ovulated sometime within the 36 hours the morning of that peak and the morning of the temperature peak. So then you can kind of deduct that it was sometime within the 24 hours that was Friday.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then if there is no temperature increase, you didn't ovulate at all.
Correct.
Yeah, because I was looking, I actually asked Maddie, I think it was like a week ago or two, just about like what do you use to track your cycle? Because like I ever since I got off birth control, I've been like really adamant about it because I was in college and we all that sort of stuff. I'm like trying not to get pregnant, but now as like me and my fiance we have conversations like, okay, we're getting married next September. We want to get pregnant before like the end of 2025. Like we want babies. And so we always talk about, I'm like, okay, like I'm trying to like learn more about my body and like doing different ways of like tracking cycle. And so what is the fridge one? Because I am
Oh.
such a visual person that when I saw that on your story, I was like, okay, this might seem like something kind of fun because the visual aspect of it. I don't know. Like, does it seem like a game to anyone else? Because it feels fun to me.
It is fun. I have them. I don't know if you're gonna post like the video. I have them like right
Yeah,
here.
we are.
Yeah.
But so there's 2 different designs that I've created. So one of the designs has that I initially created. I don't know if you can really like see it well. My blur is on, but it's got like it's a 28-day cycle, and obviously not everyone has. I don't even have a 28-day cycle. So I was like, why'd I create a 28-day cycle to begin with? But Um, and then I created another design that doesn't have the days. So this one would be more so the goal that I had in mind with creating this was not necessarily for like myself to track based on the fridge, but more so for my husband to know where I'm at, because that's important, right? For also we're not trying to get pregnant right now. We're gonna be moving soon. So I was like, I'm not moving pregnant. Like we'll try after we get into a house. So he needs to know that, but also he needs to know like I'm sensitive AF right now. Like, bring me flowers, please. And so I always communicate that verbally to him. But this was kind of a fun way and just a constant reminder because it's on the fridge. Every time he opens the
Mm.
fridge, he can see where I'm at and know, oh, she's on her period today, or oh, she's in the follicular phase. So she feels good, or oh, she's in that fertile zone. Like, I got to be careful. Like, we need to, like, we'll have to talk about that before we do anything. And so it's kind of a visual reminder more so for like your partner, but also a fun way for you too. Like, I love just changing my magnet. I'm like, oh, next phase, even though I track it in my too, I like doing it on the magnet. So both of them are on Amazon. If you want to actually show your significant other or track your cycle with the specific day and move it every day, that one is available. The one without the days, where you just want basically your partner to know what phase you're in, that one's also available. And you would have to just, you can either use like a sharp, or not a Sharpie, like a dry erase or a little magnet, a little fridge magnet to move it on top of this magnet.
I
I
feel
love
like
that.
that's such a great tool for like kids. Like for young girls, right? I was told nothing about my literally nothing. Like
Oh, I knew nothing.
knew nothing. I just was like, what is
Wait.
happening? What?
The only information that I had was a sister and the American
A
Girl
nun, a
doll
nun.
book. The American
No?
Girl doll book. Do you know that?
Wait,
What's a nun?
I thought
A
because you were
nun?
I thought because you were in Catholic school.
You
Okay,
think they
Matt,
talked about that shit?
Well,
did
I
you know
thought you meant
nuns?
like
She
she
meant
did.
like a nun.
Well,
Like,
I think nuns left the school like 30 years ago.
no,
No,
my
not
school,
hers.
I
You had
had,
nuns?
yeah. They didn't wear like the habit and everything, but like, no, they were not, there was no talk of your period. Like, I had the American Girl doll book. Like, just, I'm gonna
Oh.
insert a picture here. The trauma around that book is horrible. It was horrible. So yeah, I agree. Having this type of thing would be
Mhm.
like so helpful. Just understanding because that book, nightmare fuel.
I have not read that book, so I'm unfamiliar with it. But yeah, I think that would be. I mean, somehow I get on like parent TikTok, and it's like moms teaching their daughters about that and destignifying it
Yeah,
because why is it such a bad, terrible thing? Like
Hmm.
that we're just
yeah,
told from a young age, like you're dirty. You know what I mean? That's basically what it feels like.
yeah,
And I wouldn't mind having it on my fridge and being like, "Look, Joel, this is where we're at. This
yeah.
is what the wrath you get today."
Literally. Yeah, because also it's like sometimes you don't want to explain yourself,
Mhm.
right? We women, I feel constantly are in this feeling of I have to explain myself, whatever it is. And so, one more thing to add to that list, and just having it be a really incredible communication tool and to create understanding from your partner and having your partner actually learn about something that you are experiencing every single day, every single month. Like that, I love that tool. I think it's awesome. Ordering it, Amazon, we'll link it below.
Everyone go get one. Super cute.
Love it.
I wanted to hit on two more things since we're talking about pregnancy still and whatnot. What are like the biggest misconceptions that you encounter that, new clients come to you saying, like, I don't know what to do. My doctor told me this or that. Or
Mhm.
what do you notice with pregnancies and misconceptions?
So I think the biggest misconception is that there's nothing you can do,
Mm.
because a lot of times women will they've been trying for a year, they go to their doctor, like this is an email I get regularly, and they are like given the option to go on like Clomid or several other different types of fertility based medication, and that's their next option, but they were never spoke to about any of the discussion we had today about their eggs, about their partner's sperm. They weren't talked about removing certain toxins like BPA or phthalates that have really big negative consequences to fertility, those two specifically. They weren't given blood work to look at like their vitamin D, a full thyroid panel. They weren't talked to about even if they were trying in the right phase of their cycle,
Mm,
or that they can change their nutrient status too, like with their nutrition or their nervous system. Like they're just told well, your next step is medication. And then after that, you can do IUI. And then after that, if that doesn't work, you can do IVF. And it's
mm,
like some
Mhm.
women, yes, need that. And I'm so glad that we have those options for certain women, but it's also so expensive. So expensive. And so it's really kind of makes me wonder with when doctors, that's like their first mode of action versus all of these things they can do on their own at home with their nutrition
mm.
and changing their products and getting rid of BPA and phthalates, working on their nervous system and all of that. Yeah, it may take more time, but also if you do end up needing medication or IUI or IVF, doing all of these things is going to increase those chances for you, because just because you go through IVF doesn't grant you success. I know
Right.
several women, and a lot of times that is the case. A lot of women do
Oh.
IVF
Yep.
multiple rounds before it works. So
Yeah.
if you work on these things at home alongside, you're either not going to need it or you're going to have better chances when you do need it.
I agree. I would say that's such a common misconception, even with if you're doing some sort of fertility treatment, because I I know people that have had, have used IVF, have used IUI, and there's not, just from the general conversations with them, there's not a lot of information that I feel like they're getting to like help increase the odds of it working, because it is so expensive. You're probably feeling that stress. Like if this doesn't work,
Mhm.
maybe we're out of options because it's so expensive. And oh man, what a really unfortunate and like really sad thing that probably a lot of couples experience, not, not doing the stuff that you're talking about at home first
Yeah.
because
And
they just don't know.
it's not their fault. So if you're listening to what
No,
you're
yeah.
gonna do, it is not your fault that your doctor didn't tell you about any of it. So, but it's just like it breaks my heart. It's like really sad and disheartening because there is so many things that you can do. And yeah, it's gonna take, this is another reason why I say start doing and working on preconception health a year before,
Hmm.
because a lot of women get a timeline in their head and then they're like, okay, well, that all everything you're telling me to do is like going to change my health over the course of a year, but I want to get pregnant tomorrow. Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to stop trying for the next year just in case it does work. And then you're adding more and more stress every month it doesn't happen. So that's why I keep talking about preconception health. Honestly, it's like the biggest thing for me is to try to save some heartbreak of it not trying by working on it a year or two before so that you have maybe a little bit better chance when you do try for it to be successful.
Mm.
Whenever you're going through this process, the preconception health, are you having your clients like say, hey, right now, we're not going to focus on keep trying and trying to get pregnant every month. We're just going to focus on the preconception health part. Is that what you typically do?
That's a really hard conversation um, to have with them. I
Hmm.
I try to suggest that. Uh,
Hmm.
whether they take that advice, I don't know.
Well, you
Right.
would rather them, is what you're saying.
Yes, I would
Mm.
rather wait just because I also get, and this may be a little bit the health anxiety in myself. Like that might be projecting it onto my clients. Of I don't want them to then have a miscarriage if things
Mm.
aren't
Mm.
like, if they're, I know their progesterone's not great and we're working on their progesterone, I would prefer we wait until we get progesterone labs back that it's in a good place. Because
Yeah.
Mm.
if you do get pregnant and your progesterone's low, you have a really high chance of losing that baby in the first three
Oh, wow. I could tell you right
Hmm.
now, knock on wood, I don't want kids, but if I were to get pregnant, I would have a miscarriage because my progesterone is so low.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that right now, but that's kind of crazy. Like, that's not something like I've ever heard, you
And
know?
that's where my husband's like, you view it as such a science experiment and not like this miraculous, beautiful thing. And I'm like, because it is this miraculous and beautiful thing, but I also know a lot of the science that can make that miracle feel like, why me?
Yep.
And I want to try to prevent that for as many women as I can and let the miracles happen and whatnot alongside the
Mhm.
science.
I
Yeah.
almost feel like the idea of miracles and the fact that so many women feel like it's their body against them is, and this might be like me with the tinfoil hat on, I'm gonna proudly claim
Put it
that,
on.
but it's almost like it takes the power away from the women to get their body in a position to have a baby, and it's like the medical system having like an authoritative grip over women's health,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
we're not taught, I haven't been taught any of this stuff. So like if I were, like I said, if I were to accidentally get pregnant, I probably would have a miscarriage and my progesterone is so bad right now. And for me, I would think, why is my body against me if I wanted to get pregnant
Yes.
or whatever. And it's kind of like, I don't know if you feel this way, but that's kind of how I feel. It's like, especially having gone through my autoimmune disease journey and the medical system was very much not on my side. It's kind of like a way to keep, not keep women, but keep the patient in its place to where you come back and you go to things like IVF and you go their route and they're making more money.
Knowledge is power, and a lot of women don't have that knowledge. And it's, once again, no
Mhm.
fault to their own, but that
Mhm.
knowledge of, or education of how conception works beyond egg meets sperm and
Mhm.
Mhm.
all of everything we've talked about today. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And even, we didn't really touch on this, but like your preconception nutrient stores, like how healthy is your diet and how much choline and methylfolate and your fat soluble vitamins you have prior to getting pregnant is basically what carries the pregnancy for the first 4 weeks until the placenta is developed. So if your diet is absolutely horrid and you're not eating, you have a very low micronutrient status, then you may have, like, the egg may have met the sperm, but there just wasn't
Mhm.
enough nutrients that we need to go through those next phases to get
Mm.
to a viable pregnancy.
Is that
And
why they suggest going on
like a prenatal before. Yeah.
yes.
hmm
Okay.
Mhm.
But I think
So, what should the man be doing as we are getting our bodies ready? I also want some healthy ass sperm and not some like jank, let's be real. Like,
Shakespeare.
well, like it's all about the women. And I feel there
yeah.
is a part of like the patriarchy that it's all about you and you have to do all these things. But what would that look like for your partner?
The same exact thing the woman's doing.
Yeah.
Literally the same exact thing. My husband
Slay.
and I can't wait to put him through fertility boot camp. That man loves a Zen. He loves a Zen, and I'm like,
Yep.
can't wait to throw those out.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, so does
Yeah.
Joel. So
Because
And
does Joel.
it's so important because the quality of their sperm, like, are you drinking, are you smoking weed,
yeah,
what are you eating, like,
yeah,
I'm not trying to police anybody, but at
yeah.
the same time, if
Yeah.
we
Well,
are taking care of ourselves to make this happen, so do you. Oh, I love the fertility boot camp aspect. I love that.
he will be in actual training camp,
That's
because
iconic.
50% of a genetic issues with either the egg, not the egg, but with chromosomal issues along the way within all of the different phases come from the man's sperm not
Yep.
being genetically
Mm.
healthy. Just as we can have like unfit eggs that are not genetically prepared, they can have the
Mm-hmm.
same with their sperm. And that it's not just about how many they have, it's about their strength, the sperm strength,
Mm.
and the shape of the sperm. You can have like deformed sperm, and that is
Mm.
a non-genetically fit sperm. And so doing things like overconsumption of caffeine is a big one.
Mm.
Cycling, like biking,
Oh
and
yeah.
hot tubs and saunas are not great for sperm.
Oh
Um,
What
wow.
about this is like not
These
meant to
are
come
important.
off as funny, But like, what about like either your phone or like a laptop on your, like for a
Yeah.
man?
No,
Okay.
yeah, it's the same. The
Because I
EMF.
feel like people like kind of like jokingly will, say that because they're like, oh, it either isn't going to make a big deal or let me like put my phone on my balls. So like I'm not going to get someone pregnant.
What?
Even like in like scripted like comedies, like raunchy comedies. Come on now. But wow, that's so interesting. I have like a checklist in my head.
Yeah, those things, nicotine, um, tobacco,
Mm,
alcohol, all of those things are you want to reduce
mm,
drastically. Now, I will say it is a little bit of a shorter timeline for men. So their sperm is, we have that kind of like, I say a year. Now, technically, that timeline is like 3 to 4 months from DNA to ovulation, right? But I would say give yourself 2 cycles of that. So that's where that 8 to 12 months comes from. For men,
mm,
it's 2 months. So it would be 2 to 4 months for them to
mm,
like kind of revamp and rehealthify their sperm. So they don't have to
Mm-hmm.
do it for a full year if they're like addicted to nicotine and caffeine. Um, but I would say that 2 to 4 months mark is when they should really decrease their intake of those things I listed, really start working on their nutrition, making sure they're having omegas, making sure they're having choline and methylfolate for themselves, antioxidants. Oxidative stress, once again, is a really big heavy hitter for sperm health. And so, making sure you're having a diet high in antioxidants. So, like vitamin C rich foods, vitamin E rich foods, berries, polyphenols, things like that can really help to combat because that's what an antioxidant is. It's
mm,
anti-oxidative stress. So
Mm.
that's what they're fighting within your body. So
mm,
working on the diet, gut health, nervous system, all of that, the man should be doing as well for his sperm health because their sperm is just as important in the genetic makeup of our children. And so
mm,
they are very much 50% of the equation. And so they should also be doing the same amount of work.
mm.
Interesting.
Love,
Yeah.
love that whole fertility boot camp. Maybe you make a program out of it if you haven't already,
What about it?
because that's iconic. And I would sure as hell sign me and James up for that because look, if I have to do, like, I always tell him, I'm like, I clean the litter boxes now because he's grossed out by that. But I'm like, when I get pregnant, you have to do these things. And
Mhm.
so if we're on our journey together, I'm going to be like, look, man, you gotta, you gotta do these things too, because like we're in this together. Like,
Yeah.
wow, I loved that whole explanation. I feel like how, how empowering, because you never hear about that as much as we
Hmm.
just did in the last like 10 minutes of that fertility boot camp.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I wrote that down. I'm going to create a
Yes.
program.
I thought you
Yes.
already had one, to be honest.
Well, I have a lot of like one-on-ones clients for fertility, but that just sparked some ideas of like I could do fertility boot camp for couples or for
Yeah.
men to just a
That's
Yes.
that's that's
program.
what I thought. I was like,
I don't have that, so
there you
I'm gonna
go.
create that and just send them
Yes.
that.
There you go. Random question. We'll say a last question because we've talked about red light before.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
there what research have you seen with red light in helping men's sperm count?
I haven't looked too much into
Mm.
that. I do know that red light is very beneficial for testosterone production,
Mm.
and overall hormonal production, whereas actually, fun fact, melatonin can decrease those things if you use high dose melatonin. Um,
Mm.
and so I do know that red light, whether it's from your red light box or the sun, is really good for hormonal production, as well as
Mm,
actually like sunlight is good for testosterone production as well, which testosterone production is going to influence certain markers of sperm health.
mm.
Mm. Interesting.
So we all need to make sure we're getting outside more and touching our grass. We should do this anyways, but like I always like Maddie for there's a I don't know if you're still doing it on your stories, but for a period of time you'd be like getting like my sunlight first thing in the morning and I'd like be watching on my phone. And I'm like, all right, put your phone down and go outside and just like stand on the porch and like take in your sunlight. I love that. I love
Uh,
that. Ah, that was so interesting. Like I was literally like I was like taking notes as like I'm writing this, and like when I like go to pull clips, I know I'm just gonna like end up watching this all over again because that was so incredibly informative in a way that I don't feel I've heard in other places. I mean, Maddie, have you like do you feel like you've because your goal is different than mine.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you were trying to be more proactive in like learning these sorts of things to try and like avoid pregnancy.
Well,
Like,
I definitely should be. My
oh.
my mind has been for how many years obsessed, for lack of better words, on autoimmune, like
Yeah.
not be sick. So like fertility, I'm just like that's like in the back of my mind. We use
Yeah.
protection. I loosely track my period. I'm like not super worried. I definitely should be, right? Knowledge is power. But I know for me, like I was getting confused about like when you actually ovulate because I mean
Me
I have
too.
numerous books on it, but honestly, like it's kind of hard to understand sometimes. Like I like, when I took OChem too, I struggled. So sometimes understanding this stuff can be a little bit tricky. So I really loved how you broke it down, and I think this conversation was really, really valuable for anyone, whether you want to get pregnant or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, like, even if you don't want to get pregnant, your everything, Maddie, you're doing for autoimmunity is helping
Hmm.
your
Mm.
fertility. So it's like it's all connected, right? Is if you're working on your diet for your gut health, you're improving your fertility by doing that. It's not just this like bucket that we have to work on
Hmm.
separately. Everything comes together. And even if you never want to have kids, it is important to have healthy ovulation. Maybe you don't care about like your egg health, but your hormonal and ovulatory health is important because you want to have progesterone. You want to have healthy luteal phases so that
Hmm.
the other areas of your life are good as well, because
Hmm.
not having good hormonal output can cause you to feel crazy. So you're working on the
Genuinely.
same thing for different purposes.
Oh, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Which I love to think about our health in that way. We can all be focused on taking care of our bodies and the cliche of like, my body is a temple, and we can all have different goals, but we can do a lot of the same work and kind of be there to support each other in that way, even though your goals are differing, kind of like in business a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, that was awesome. Okay, so where can people go to find you? We'll link everything below. We'll link the Amazon trackers, but where can people go to find you if they have questions or they want to learn more about your services?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and TikTok. On Instagram, it's at Leslie Monnette. On TikTok, it's Leslie K Health N Hormones. Kind of long. Um, and then, yeah, you can find pretty much all of my stuff through those two social medias.
Awesome. We'll link everything below, and really thank you so much. This was such a good conversation. And why do I feel like so less stressed about like the thought of like trying to conceive? I don't know, but it was amazing.
Good, because it's in your power.
Yes,
Mhm.
I love that. All right. Thank you, Leslie.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening or watching to Kind of Hot, Kind of Healthy. Please make sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review, and share this with your girlfriend who wants to get pregnant or is trying to get pregnant or trying to avoid pregnancy. They need to hear this.
They knew.
They do. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere where you can stream podcasts. If you have a burning question about life, friends, and health and want our 2 cents, email us at kindahotpod@gmail.com. That's KINDAHOTPOD@gmail.com. Bye.
Bye.